Last week, Fender did something that they've never done, not once in their 77-year history. Welcome to Get Offset. My name is Emily, and that color looks great on you. You should wear more of it. But I'm here today to talk about the Fender Shields Blender. That's their first ever signature guitar pedal, and it is a behemoth. The Fender Shields Blender is a two-channel fuzz that's vintage inspired and in fact based on the famed Fender Blender that first came out in the late 60s and was produced through the 70s. Released in 1968, which I believe is the same year the Big Muff V1 was released, the Fender Blender saw some pretty strong initial success. It was part of this big wave of early fuzz pedals, but demand for it kind of fizzled out in the late 70s. And though I am not positive about this, I believe it was last produced in 77, although most of the listings for it I saw online were from either 68 or 74. So the Fender Blender was an octave fuzz that, though kind of fizzled out in popularity in the late 70s, saw newfound fame thanks to people like Kevin Shields from My Bloody Valentine, other shoegazers, and Billy Corgan from the Smashing Pumpkins. The original Fender Blender was a four-knob affair with two foot switches. There were controls for volume, sustain, tone, and blend, and there was another tone toggle switch, foot switch I should say, that kind of upped that EQ, making it push and punch a little bit more. Though I've never personally been able to play a Fender Blender, I looked up some articles, some videos. Vintage Guitar Magazine says it was partially inspired by Roger Mayer's Octavia, but they also credit the late 60s Super Fuzz designed by effects legend Fumio Maeda, who you may remember as inventor of the Univibe. The Fender Blender has been out of production for decades, which is obviously going to affect the price. Right now, reverb listings for it kind of vary between $350 on the low end and $1,000 on the high end. That being said, I think the recent release of the Shields Blender has affected that in a way. If you look at the selling history on Reverb, between $300 and $500 is the kind of more accurate sales price. The 68 versions kind of bottom out around $400, where previously you've been able to get the 74 version for around $300 on the low end. Both of them kind of max out at $500. So that brings us to the present day. Apparently Fender and Kevin Shields have been working on this pedal for years, and the result is last week. If you're watching this in June 2023, if you're watching in the future, the June 2023 release of the Fender Shields Blender for $499, you could get essentially a souped up version of the original Fender Blender, which Shields has been playing since the 80s. And this thing has a lot going on. According to the press release, unfortunately, I wasn't able to play this pedal. That's not uncommon with limited releases like this. But according to the press release, there's an octave up switch that enables you to just completely turn off the octave so you can play it like a normal fuzz. But let's talk about the channels, because I think this is one of the cooler parts of the pedal. It has two channels. The first one blends clean signal with the fuzz. That's kind of standard. But the second channel, instead of putting that original clean in, it removes the clean and blends the fuzz with a second monophonic sub-octave fuzz. It's beefy, it's meaty, it sounds really cool from videos I've seen. And I'm just going up there in terms of coolness. Let's talk about that sag foot switch. So this introduces a reactive sag circuit, which introduces sputtering and ducking controlled by the dynamics of your playing. So it works by starving transistors of power relative to your picking dynamics, the intensity of your picking. And I think that is really cool, really smart. Fender calls it, I believe, like revolutionary or something. Whether or not that's too strong a word depends on who you are, but I think it's really sick. Long story short, this fuzz is an absolute monster. It retailed for $499 and there were 700 units made. And of course, It sold out immediately. I heard that it was only available on reverb.com and Andertons, so Reverb in the US and Andertons in the UK. Some people told me it was available at some local shops. I have not been able to confirm that. Regardless, it sold out. And then, of course, is being immediately resold for an enormous markup. Originally listed for $499, which frankly, compared to the going price of actual vintage units and the added functionality, the fact that it's a hand-copied circuit from the original and is signed by Kevin Shields, $499 feels really, really fair for this unit. What doesn't feel so fair is what the resellers are charging for it, which I believe $1,500 was the cheapest I saw and $2,000 was the most. The $1,500 one was sealed in the box and the rest were taken out of the box to photograph them and then are just being flipped. This isn't just pure greed. To quote a tweet from Nick Reinhardt, this is corny as hell. And we see this every single time a limited edition pedal with a modicum of hype is released. Think about when Chase Bliss sold their ZVEX collaboration, the Bliss Factory, for the first time. It was sold for $500 and it immediately flipped for like $1,500 from people. It's lame, it happens every time, and I would really love for this behavior to stop. I mean, sometimes people are even reselling these before they have the product in hand. So what can we do to stop this? Some companies like Chase Bliss, they find ways to take the wind out of a reseller's sale, and I'm a big proponent of that. It's hard to do, but there are ways to do it. For the ZVEX Chase Bliss collaboration, originally it was only going to be released in a certain color. That sold out immediately, and then Chase Bliss worked with ZVEX to make more of them in a different color. That way, the people who bought the limited edition are still getting the limited edition colorway, but the other people, the other musicians who actually want to buy it and play it, they're still getting the pedal with all the same functionality. It just isn't the original. And I think that's a really, really good way to go about it. Recently, we've seen the ticketing industry introduce something that they call verified fans, where, listen, I've never done that process. I don't know exactly how it works, but the hope for it is that it eliminates resale because real fans get the tickets in the first place. I don't really know how you do that with guitar pedals and gear like this. The only way I can think of is a mailing list, and there's nothing keeping someone whose goal is to resell these products from signing up from that mailing list. Ticketing companies have also been known to cancel scalped orders. This happens sometimes, so like if there's no resale rules, if they see your seats on StubHub or something, they'll just go ahead and cancel them. You'll get your money back as a scalper, and I don't know if they're also contacting StubHub to tell them like, hey, we've canceled these tickets, you need to pull them. If they've already been resold, you need to refund that. I don't know what they're doing because I've never been on either side of that. But pedal companies have kind of done this. Chase Bliss is the only one that I can think of who has implemented, you can only buy one rules where you can only buy one pedal from one of these limited editions, and then before they ship any of them out, they go through and they double check to make sure there aren't two going to the same address, there aren't two associated with the same or an extremely similar email address, because with Gmail, like if my email account is emily@gmail.com, which is not because I'm not that early to Gmail, it would also work to send me an email to e.m.i.l.y@gmail.com. Putting dots in a Gmail is an easy way to circumvent rules about using multiple email addresses. I've done it to get like extra trials with Dropbox in college. I don't do that anymore. I pay for things now. But when I was in college and I needed a second Dropbox account, I was able to do that. So that is to say, when Chase Bliss would see somebody who had bought 2, 3, 4 of a pedal that were all going to the same address, paid for with the same credit card, they'd cancel all the orders because that's a pretty dead giveaway that you're going to scalp some of those. There aren't a lot of people using multiple fuzz factories or bliss factories or ayahuascas on a pedal board. Those kinds of pedals just aren't conducive to having two of them. Scalping sucks. End stop. And everybody is affected by it in some way or another. Like, I don't like to buy flipped pedals. I don't flip pedals myself, but I do have some pedals I would kind of like to sell just because I don't use them, and I'd love to see them go to someone who would. But I'm honestly, I'm a little afraid that I would sell those pedals at a reasonable price, and the person that I sell them to would just flip them. And then I'd feel kind of gross for being in some way part of a really nasty practice, and I'd feel really taken advantage of. Ultimately, the only way to end scalping in a free and open market is to not buy from scalpers, from flippers. And I know that's really hard because if you really want this piece of gear, especially something that's been signed by the artist, it's going to be really like if you can afford it reasonably, responsibly, you might say like, why, yeah, why shouldn't I? Like, I can afford this. And like, I get that. That's fine. That's your prerogative. But it's just going to encourage more people to continue to do this. The way to stop flippers is to take the wind out of their sails. It's so to kind of foot them with the bill of their nastiness. So best case scenario for them would be they get their money back. And that's, I think that if you're reselling a pedal, frankly, that's the best you can hope for. And in my experience, the pedal economy has generally been such that when you buy a piece of gear, especially used, it retains its value well enough so that, like, if you decide you don't like it, you can resell it maybe for just like a slight loss, if that. My hope with this product in particular and other similar ones is kind of the Chase Bliss method, where if there's enough demand for a pedal that it sells out in a day, like this one did, that the company will then go and they'll make another run of it, maybe in a different colorway, probably without the signature. But if it's the functionality that people are really interested in, really want, I would love for companies to continue to make that available to people. Not charging less for them because you got to make your money, I'm sure. And obviously, Kevin Shields is getting some portion of money, hopefully, from this deal. I know that all artist endorsed pedals kind of work differently, but still. If they make a second run of this, it's really, really gonna like screw scalpers, which is flippers, whatever you want to call them, which is something I kind of love to see, honestly, because then people will be able to get it new without paying these inflated prices, and they're going to be happy because for 1,500 to 2,000 bucks, you can fill your board up with original Fender blenders. They're obviously not going to have that extra functionality, but I'm just making a point here. And if there's anything I know about the guitar pedal industry, is that if something has a lot of demand, and this is kind of like dubious levels of like coolness, it's going to get copied in some way, shape, or form. Pedal clones are kind of just a part of the industry. And if the original builder doesn't step up to like make more of them, like if something goes completely out of production, it's really common to see somebody pick it up, make something that sounds close to it, works close to it, like buy an original one, open it up and see what that is. And whether or not you agree with that as a practice, that is something that happens. And frankly, if Fender decides to never make another Shields blender again, I would rather see people give money to companies that are filling that void than people who are being gear hoarders and flippers and trying to make a profit off of something that's a tool for musicians to use to make their music. If you disagree with me, let me know in the comments. I'm really, really curious to what you all think. And yeah, that's all I've got for you. No demo for me. I've asked to see if they have a unit on loan that they'd like to send me, but only 700 of these were made. It's really not uncommon for such limited releases to not get a ton of demos because they sort of sell themselves, let's be honest. Well, thanks for watching. Thanks for understanding. You should get more shirts in that color. It really brings out, makes your eyes pop, if you know what I mean. Until next time, my name is Emily. Goodbye.